everybody. Today's podcast is something that we've been planning for a little while, and it's in relation to domestic violence, whether that's from a female perspective, a male perspective, a trans perspective, whatever it is. It's just DV in general. And I am here today with the lovely Joplin Higgins, who I realised this morning I've probably known for like 9 years, because I'm 9 years in business next month, and I think you're a little bit ahead of me. So we've known each other for a little while. So Jop, if you just want to introduce yourself and maybe just explain what has made you really passionate about exploring the DV space and helping people in DV situations.
Oh, hey, Stace. Firstly, before I do that, I just want to say to you a huge thank you for allowing me to come on your podcast, because sometimes we're in conflict together and act against each other, and we've got businesses in the same town. And I think often that people think, that potentially we don't like each other, because we're women. And that seems to be this, myth that's out there that we just can't get along. But, our businesses have really supported each other. I've been in business 12 years and you've been in business 9 years. And throughout that time, I think we've had such a wonderful, supportive relationship. So I'm really grateful for women like you. So thank you. And I look forward to another 9-12 years acting against you and working together in the collaborative space that our firms work really often to resolve people's issues. So it's great to work with women like you. But I'm Joplin Higgins. I'm a family lawyer. I own Joplin Lawyers, which is a Hunter Valley firm. I've been a solicitor for nearly 2 decades now, and I always wanted to be a criminal lawyer. That's what I wanted to be, except one day I walked into the firm that I was working at, and they were like, the family lawyer had quit. I was the criminal lawyer, and they were like, okay, so you're doing family law now. And I was like, oh my God, what? And they were like, yep, you're doing family law. And I said, why? And they said, oh, because you're a woman and you'll be good at it. So at the time I was like, oh, okay. I don't know if girls would have that reaction now if a partner of a law firm said that to them. But at the time I was like, yeah, righto, that's what I'll do. So I really had no aspirations going through law school or anything like that to be a family lawyer. But I thoroughly enjoy family law, and I was really happy that family lawyer quit, and the partners thought because I was female I'd be good at it. So
all right.
Sometimes you just land in the damnedest of places, and I think this is one of those situations.
Yeah, well, I majored in criminal law as well, so I was meant to be a criminal law lawyer, and then obviously doing criminal law, I'm like, nope, I'm out.
Yeah, I know. I think you have a few losses in criminal court, and then you see people going to jail or whatever it is, and you go, oh God, this is really heavy. So
I think she was pretty heavy than I anticipated. Definitely don't regret doing. I did a lot of legal aid stuff, and meeting people in the cells and having to go to Cessnock jail and all of that. So it definitely would have helped me in my career. But I thought, a blonde female walking through a jail wasn't
your ideal. Wasn't what you thought. Yeah.
So today we're speaking in relation to DV. So I mentioned before that we're getting a lot of clients. So usually when you think of DV, it's a female being in that relationship, like she's the one that's having, an abusive partner. But we're getting the opposite, where we have males coming to us. Let's use the word allegedly, and saying from a female perspective, 3 sides to every story, where it's a female that's perpetrating violence, whether it's verbal, physical, both, financial control against a male. So whatever you're comfortable with discussing, whether it's from a female perspective, male perspective, it's probably still all relatively relevant anyway for either sex. But we're saying before, if you can just let us know what some early warning signs are that you're in a DV relationship, we said that if that's all you know, that's what's familiar, and that's just how you think a relationship goes. And it definitely shouldn't be the case if you're getting bashed every day or verbally abused every day. So what are some early warning signs that whether it's happening to you or you're listening to this and you think that a friend or a family member is in a DV situation, what can people look out for?
I suppose domestic violence is spoken in genders because females are statistically higher the victim. Now, that is not to say that males are not the victims of family violence. They are. And family violence, as we all know, takes on lots and lots of different forms. Gone are the days, thank goodness, that we think about family violence in that it's only physical abuse. It has a broad spectrum, which is acknowledged in the Family Law Act, in the definitions, but also in criminal law, in care and proceedings. So there's all areas of law are acknowledging and defining family violence, which is a lot more than physical violence. But women typically are the ones that are dying from family violence. Now, last year, one of the statistics is 101 women died at the hands of a male perpetrator.
And that's Australia?
That's in Australia. So that's significant. I think in 1 week we had 5 women last year.
Yeah, remember it wasn't bad weeks.
At the hands of their male partner or their ex-male partner. So it's not to discount that it happens to men, because it does. And men traditionally underreport family violence. And it's not a situation where advocates are saying, well, it's not as bad if it's happening to a male victim. That's just simply not the way it's viewed either. I think that's the way males think it's viewed, but that's definitely not the way it's viewed. But when you're looking at this holistically and globally, women are primarily the victims of family violence. So it's bad no matter what the gender is. So that's a myth that needs to be expelled as well. I think when we talk about relationships, I think when you go into a relationship and everything's new, but there are warning signs really early on, typically in family violence. It just doesn't happen when they're married. It just doesn't happen one day. And that's how the understanding of family violence has really evolved. I think it's when victim survivors have an incident where they go, oh my God, that is so abnormal. Geez, that's poor behaviour. But then as women and as girls, we're conditioned to go, oh no, they didn't mean that. Oh, he's bullying you and pulling your pigtails because he likes you. No, he's not doing that because he likes you. He's doing that because he's a little thug and he hasn't been told any different. And so when you're conditioned like that, as we are as women, and particularly, you know, I'm a bit older than you, Stace, but particularly particularly as women, you know, in our generation and our mother's generation and our grandmother's generations, my God, imagine if you thought that that was not normal behaviour, because that's what you're conditioned for, right? So it's when what I say to what I would be saying to young girls and what I would be saying to women of, you know, my age and older, when you hear that, listen to your intuition. Listen to the fact that you go, you know what, that's not okay. And you know what? If it's early stages of a relationship, it's easy to get out. You don't have to stay. And that's the messaging. Particularly, I'm gonna do this in gendered. Particularly to young girls, we need to be saying to them, no. Do not tolerate that. Do not tolerate the fact that he turned around and called you a bitch. No, that's not okay. That's not right, because that comment of you being a bitch, that turns into something else. And so it's from that moment, and then we look at the love bombing and, you know, the intensity of relationship. That's also not normal. But I also get that in the infancy of relationship, it is intense. There's lust, there's all of those feelings, but it's when those feelings actually become abnormal.
Yeah,
so it's being able, sorry, Stace, it's being able to recognize that.
Yeah.
And how do we do that? Well, we do that through education through the schools. So they have some wonderful programs that they're teaching the children in relation to that. And that's in primary school and in high school. But I really think that we need to have more education in the high school, because that's where family violence that no one's talking about, or relationship violence, actually really, really starts, where there's this real disconnect between about what is a social norm, what is okay behaviour, and what just simply isn't.
Yeah, I agree. And it's really hard if you're growing up, like if you're a child and, you know, in like growing up and that's all you see, what happens to your parents. It's like, okay, that's normal. And it's and it's obviously, it might be normal for them, but it's not meant to be normal in general. And it's breaking that, okay, they don't have a healthy relationship. That's not right. And I definitely agree it needs to start with schools. I think basics. So my kids are like junior, middle, and senior school. That's what their school is. There's no kind of like, you know, primary school and high school there. Yeah. But I think there definitely needs to be something probably in that middle school grade. Yeah. So maybe that's from like, well, in our case, it's from year 6 to year 8, and then seniors 9 to 12. Something basic, not so full on, kind of maybe in that middle school bracket. And then when you hit high school, when those relationships start to get serious and you're driving and you've kind of got like free range and, you know, I think definitely more education needs to be done in that field. I can't say I've really seen it at my girls' school. They've definitely had like, you know, what's appropriate, not what's not appropriate type thing. But, you know, it's a pretty heavy subject, I suppose. And, you know, there'll be ways to make it less
age appropriate.
Yeah. So definitely agree that from a, you know, middle school, high school perspective, that's where you're going to get the change, because they're not going to be hitting kind of our age, so like 40 and above, and go, right, so okay, so I've been doing this for 20 years and this isn't normal. So it's,
and I suppose just on that, Stacey, is one of the things that I find really interesting, and I do quite a bit of research on, is when we look at perpetrators, right? And we look at, because sometimes it is a learned behaviour, and that's not to make an excuse for a perpetrator, but a perpetrator is like an onion. So you really have to look at what each layer is, right? And so when you drill down into it, you have to look, is there childhood trauma? Have they been exposed to family violence? And an overwhelming amount of times, yes, they have. And so really then it becomes the question of, we look at children and we talk about children in the family law space, and we're so protective of making sure that they're not exposed to family violence. And by the time they get into the family court, they have been exposed to family violence 9 times out of 10, right? Or maybe 10 times out of 10. It's very rare that you're running a case that doesn't have some form of family violence in it now, right? Yeah. And so you look at that child in the victim lens, and then they turn 18, and then they continue to conduct themselves in the manner in which they have been exposed to throughout their childhood. And then we are no longer compassionate about about that person. And I really think, particularly for younger perpetrators, you know, if they were victims, then they need to unlearn the behaviours that they have learned. And I by no means am saying that they should not have accountability, and that they should not that they should not be held at task for the manner in which they act. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, you have to understand a perpetrator, because there's very few perpetrators, in my view, that just are just violent to be violent. There are always reasons. There's always reasons for the way in which all people act. Potentially the outcome for the way in which they act is that they have no contact with their children, and that's appropriate, because you're breaking a cycle. But I always just find it really interesting, particularly with when they're just in that older adolescent stage. Monkey see, monkey do. How do you know not to act a certain way, particularly when they're in high school and their father's treating their mother really, really poorly? How do you know with an adolescent brain that that's not how you're to act? So family violence is actually a really, really complex subject, because you're dealing with people.
And I 100% agree. So, like, you know, I've done a whole about a different study apart from law. So I'm doing a clinical hypnotherapy component at the moment. A lot of that is in relation to trauma. And a component of it was exactly what you said. So it's in America. I think the amazing thing coming to Australia, I can't quite think of the name Circle is in it, but effectively it was this organization going into like prisons in America, and it was, I believe it was an optional thing. Like, you weren't, if you're a prisoner, you weren't forced to do this. And in this case, it was all men. And they would stand in a really big circle and they would ask questions. So the first question might be, please take a step forward if, and in this case, it was father and mother, like female and male, if your father yelled at your mother. And some of them were too scared to step forward, but then a lot of them did. And the next question was, please step forward if you physically saw your father hit your mother. And they kept on going and going and going. And pretty well all of the prisoners that were in there were all subject to it. And that's really sad. And again, I'm not saying it's an excuse like you are. It definitely goes through.
It's a factor.
Yeah, there's a lot of layers that goes through, and you know, some people will probably never change. And that's right.
That's right. They are just perpetrators of family violence. Yeah, and to change, you have to have accountability.
Yes.
And to change, you have to have insight. And to change, you have to have empathy. And so, you know, that's a lot of things. You know, it's only 3 things, but that's a lot of things, right, to have to do. And that's why the perpetrator programs are so important. It's an important step. It's not the cure. No. Perpetrator programs are not the cure, but they are an important component in us stopping family violence. And it makes me super sad that in Australia we have all the research from the rest of the world and we still are not doing it right. The government still is not funding it. You can fund victim services till the cows come home, and the victim services should absolutely be funded 100%. I'm not saying take money away from victim services. I'm saying put money into perpetrators, put money into the programs. Don't make it a 16-week course. You're not going to change in 16 weeks. What do you learn in 16 weeks? We don't do a university degree in 16 weeks.
Yeah.
It takes time. 52 weeks. In Israel, you know, the moment that there's family violence and the police attend, the perpetrator is removed from the home. The Department of Community Services is engaged immediately. They are engaged with a social worker, and that matter is before the family court within 72 hours.
Wow.
The perpetrator has to continue to pay, if they're working, all the mortgages, so that there's not post-separation financial abuse perpetrated. They have to live elsewhere, and then they go through the family court in a pretty quick succession of events, but they act immediately.
Wow. So there's definitely takeaways that we can get from other countries.
Man, there are just so many wonderful things that other countries are doing, and we're sitting here trying to, reinvent the wheel. The wheel's invented to all the politicians that I hope actually watch this. It's invented, boys, and it's time to get on and understand. For them to understand, Chris Minns made a comment the other day that it's just really hard because no one understands the typology of perpetrators. Incorrect. We do understand the typologies of perpetrators, and there's many. It's not just one or two, but there's things that the government that they can be doing to protect children and to protect women, and we really fail. We really fail because there's all these competing voices. And competing for money.
And for such a developed country, that's it's pretty crappy.
It's disappointing because what it does is it puts women's lives at risk. And last year was just a shocker for what happened to women in our communities.
And it's really like they don't, they don't care. They're is what it is, and we'll just continue on. Their lives are worthless.
And you do hear women saying, and feminists saying, if it was 101 men, my God, what would they be doing? What's going on? The women have gone mad. Why are they killing us? And there'd be all of these reforms, and there'd be this and that, and these children that lose their mother or are subjected to this significant violence where it ends up in a death, how do they repair? They don't.
Yeah. Well, that's assuming that they haven't been involved in a death either, because it's not just, the parents. Sometimes the kids find themselves in that situation as well for no fault of their own. So
yeah, that's exactly right. So
it was, we were in Port Quarry last week, just going on the whole female, we don't matter type thing. It was on a plaque at one of the lighthouses went to, and it was basically men are born to earn the money and look after the house and do all this. And granted, it was late 1800s or something, this piece of information was from. And then my kids were, so my two girls were with me. And then when it came to the female section, I got it on my phone. It was something like a female's purpose was to marry. That was it. And it was there is no other purpose for a female other to marry. And I'm looking at that, even my girls looking at that, oh my God, was that what it was like? I'm yeah, and you know what? It kind of probably still is the same. We probably haven't developed where we should have back then. But just reading that in writing, I was oh my God, it was the first thing I ever saw that actually just said a female has no purpose other than to marry. And I'll actually put it up when we load the podcast up. But I was happy that my girls just went, oh my God, Mum, that's not right. I'm no, it's not.
And we really, and there's been some real trailblazers before us, right? That have paved the way for you and I to be able to work, for you and I to be able to make a decision to stay at home if that's what we choose. To be able to have bank accounts, to be able to go for a mortgage. It wasn't that long ago. It was only the 70s where women really couldn't go for mortgages, So, there's a lot that's happened with our rights, but that doesn't mean it's over, right? No. There's still inequalities which need to be addressed.
Definitely agree. So coercive control, that's something that kind of has hit the media, I suppose, maybe the past few years. Do you just want to give us a breakdown of what coercive control is, and maybe if there's any signs that you're in a relationship with coercive control, and just get anything else you might want to say in relation to that topic?
Yeah, so coercive and control is probably the most insidious form of family violence. And I can remember as a junior lawyer running coercive control arguments before it actually had a name, where I was trying to form patterns for the court to show them what was happening in the lead up to there being physical violence usually. And I can remember that it just fell really on deaf ears, what I was trying to achieve. And, you know, now we're talking about it 20 years later, which is really great. But coercive control can be many things. It can be isolation. It can be a look. It can be a person knowing that if they get a text message and it has no kisses on it, that that means something to them. So it's not always obvious to the world at large what controlling and coercive behaviours are. It actually can be something that's just intimate in that relationship, which that, from an evidentiary point of view, makes it really, really hard to prove and to evidence. So what you have to do is show the pattern of behaviours, and those patterns aren't always the same. You know, they can always, they're quite different. So, you know, isolation, the silent treatment, not allowing you to go to Woolworths, timing you to go to Woolworths, giving you $100 a week for a family of 5 and having to make it stretch that far. No access to bank accounts, even though one party earns $180,000 a year. The other party earning money and it has to go into a bank account that they don't have access to. Yeah. You know, like it's just, it really is how long is a piece of string. But there was a Pickford and Pickford come out in December by the full court, and it said that the victim doesn't have to establish what the intent of the perpetrator was. It's merely how they receive that behaviour. And so that was a really important piece of law, so showing that it's not you don't have to intend it to fall a certain way. It's how I perceive your behaviours towards me. You know, there was a lot that was made around the legislation in regards to criminal in the criminal courts in regards to controlling and coercive behaviour. I have had and still do have real reservations in regards to that, because it was kind of marketed as, you know, this is the silver lining for victims of family violence, but it is really hard to establish. But my major concern was, are our first line responders, are they educated? Are they trained enough in relation to understanding what controlling and coercive behaviour is? And when a victim comes in, are they going to be able to follow the pattern that the victim, and when you're dealing with someone that has trauma, it is not always easy to have a chronology of how their mind is working due to the effects of trauma. So, you know, do the police, because that's really who I'm talking about, have that skill set to be able to, you know, maneuver their way through the pattern of behaviour. I think a lot of people were really excited about that bit of legislation. I know that there's been some charges of that, but it doesn't seem to have deterred perpetrators, because really it's just so insidious.
Yeah. And do you think it was, you know, we were saying before how we're so far behind in other countries, do you think it was, look, let's put this in to, you know, show people that we're doing something about it, that they haven't quite gone far enough with it, perhaps?
Look, you know, we have gone far enough. When you looked at Scotland, they had tremendous success in Scotland, but they also put in millions and millions and millions of dollars to training their first responders, and they did an enormous amount of training, and they had huge success with that legislation. England then implemented it and did very little training with first responders, and it was just a bit of a nightmare. And then Australia, we did it. The government said that the police had training, and they did have training. They definitely had training on it, but was it enough? I don't think so. That takes years to develop, and the police will develop better skills, I think. But it's not the silver lining for victims, that's for sure.
Yeah. So financial control. So that probably ties in with what we've already discussed as well.
Yes. Go.
Yeah,
Sorry.
usually there's one person, we'll say usually it's a male controlling all the funds, and female getting a pocket money for $100 to feed the family and buy school uniforms and school shoes and all of that type of things. Anything you want to say about the financial control of it, or whether having a secret bank account somewhere? Like, what would be your tips if you're really feeling vulnerable, especially if you have kids and you're staying at home looking after the kids? You might feel that I'm only worthy of getting a little bit of money per week because I'm the one that's at home and they're the one that's working. Yeah. Let's hope that's not what they're thinking. But in relation to the financial side, what comments do you have about that?
I think, first of all, with financial abuse, I think that in a relationship, sometimes there is always one party that possibly and probably is a bit more savvy with finances. And during the course of dating and moving in together and then marrying, one party often takes the lead in regards to finances, and we've got this bank account and should we have a shares account and all of those sorts of things. That is not financial abuse.
I agree.
And that's really important for people to understand, that everyone has a role in relationships, and that is a part of the relationship and the roles in which we all take. So that's important to understand, because this scattergun approach of, oh my God, that's financial abuse, it just simply isn't. The key to that is that when that person that is the leader of the financial discussions in a relationship, that they are discussions that you're talking about, well, this is where we're going to move this money, and what if I did that with this, and we've got that little lump sum, and there's this person's offering this interest, should we put it in a term deposit for 3 months? That's not financial abuse. That is a conversation. Financial abuse is where you have no access to funds. Financial abuse is where money is being leveraged against you. Financial abuse is when you have debts in your name that you never signed for. That's financial abuse. And I've seen recently with OnlyFans that I've seen that victims are being ushered into doing things that they probably would never have done because of the financial abuse, trying to get funds, whatever that looks like, in regards to that social media and those transactions. That is financial abuse. So financial abuse is so detrimental to a victim, survivor. It takes away their autonomy. It takes away their ability to make decisions. It isolates them. And so it just feeds into all these other forms of emotional, psychological, controlling and coercive behaviour, an erosion of self-esteem, all of those sorts of things. Financial abuse is not just about money. It then feeds into all the other streams. So financial abuse is actually really easy to identify, and it's easy to identify really early in your relationship. And I would say to anyone that they should not give up their bank account. that they should, if there's joint monies, it should be in a joint account, that you make yourself extremely vulnerable when you lose access to funds. And see, before, Stace, remember when you could go and get $20 out at Woolies and it didn't come up on your docket? You know, you could, women did and could, you know, have their little cunning kit to be able to leave. But given how everything is electronic now, that just makes that so much harder to be able to have secret bank accounts or secret money, you know, for a rainy day when they're fleeing from a really violent situation. So it's, you know, whilst technology is great, it's also been a massive Achilles heel for victim survivors, in my view.
Yeah. Do you have any tips for somebody who might be trying to
leave?
So we'll go to the leaving.
No, sorry. Just
no, I'm only like half hour. I'm like, oh, there's so much more I want to say. Tips to maybe preparing to leave. So whether, you know, it's financial, coercive, abusive, whatever it is. And, you know, especially when there's kids involved, I often see people asking, I'm in a DV situation, I don't know what to do, I have no money, I don't work, he works, and all of that. If I need to leave, I need to leave tomorrow because he's at work, like all that type of stuff. If there's somebody planning on leaving, and there's obviously elements of that, if they fear that their life is in danger and their kids, that's going to be possibly a little bit different to someone who thinks that they're not fearing their life, but there's all these other things that are leading to that relationship breaking down. What tips do you have for somebody that's trying to set themselves up to leave an abusive relationship?
Okay, so the first thing is you have to have a safe person, and whether that's a friend, a colleague, or a parent, you need a safe person. You need to establish a form of contact with them that can't be intercepted by the perpetrator. So that is important. You need to have those conversations. It's really hard for victims to be honest about what they're experiencing because there's so much shame attached to it, and they feel, you know, as if they're stupid because, you know, how did I not realize this? But sometimes it all happens, you know, all these signs are blurred, and it's just one of those things. So have that safe person. Get your documents out, birth certificates, get the children's passports out, because that is often used in post-separation as a threat of what's going to happen. So get those documents out. I know this is going to sound superficial, but if there are things that you have from your great-grandmother or things that you hold dear, get them to your safe person, because once you leave, you're never going back to that house. It's a form of control for the perpetrator. You're never going to be allowed back in. The moment you go cap in hand asking for things, that just flames their control over the situation. So they do need to be prepared. If there's joint monies, well, it's in joint names, they can take those funds out. I'm not saying spend it, but at least if you've got control over it, then that's a better situation than it being put into a bank account where you can't see what's going on. And often when that money's gone, it's just gone. The court often can't claw that back. So get control of any finances that you possibly can. Start to try and understand what your financial situation is. And this is if it's a long-term, you're thinking about leaving. You know, they may not leave, but they need to understand their financial situation. I can't tell you how many women come into me and they do not know how much is owed on their property. They don't know what their property is worth. They don't know how much super there is jointly between the parties. They don't know if there's shares, but I think there was a conversation about it, but I don't know. So, you know, that's that financial coercion but try and understand that before you leave, if you're going to leave, because it's a lot easier, even if it's just a broad spectrum of understanding, So they get what you want from the house. Do it in the safest way possible that you can when the other party is at work. If there's a safe way to do it where you don't impact the children when they're at school or whatever that looks like. But if it's safe to do so, do it when, and it's right to do so, do it when the other party's not there.
Yeah. And would you suggest telling, would you consult a lawyer? Would you go to the police? What about from an authority?
Yeah, I think it's always really important that if you're thinking of leaving, you should get legal advice. Even if it's just a broad spectrum of what the property pool is, and what you could hope to get from that. So then they can start making some financial decisions in regards to, okay, well, I can afford rent, or okay, I can go to a mortgage broker and I can do X, Y, and Z. Then the most important thing is, what does it look like for the children? What's that going to be, so you can have some really constructive dialogue, potentially, once you've left, in regards to what it's going to look like for the kids and where they're going to live, and all of those sorts of things. Yeah. It's never as calm as we're talking now, no. But and I don't suggest that it ever will be. But I think that pre-planning and having advices and getting your ducks in as much of a row as you can is really important. But the safe person is the most important strategy when leaving, because most victims try and leave many, many times before they actually leave. It's not that they get up one morning and go, yeah, I've had a gutful. It's not that at all. It's really a long process. And the safe person has to understand that. The safe person can't be, oh my God, why hasn't she left? Well, she hasn't left for many reasons, because the victims do love the perpetrator. They just want their relationship to be safe. If you really talk to victim survivors, they say that we have wonderful times. It's just when this happens, or when this happens, if we could take that out of our relationship, it would be wonderful. And they have this longing for them to have that loving person, which at certain times that they know throughout the course of their relationship.
Yeah. And probably also, tracking is really big. I know I track my girls, the Life 360, make sure you take the tracking off your mobile. So, you're not easy with it. Life 360.
Get your cars checked, change your password.
Yeah, so that, I had it on my list, but I'd popped up before. So there's definitely been more people say, hey, I think I'm getting tracked. I think there's a AirTag or something in my car. Is that a take it to a mechanic to see if they can find something? What happens if you think you're being tracked? Do you have any?
Yeah, we usually get our people to see an IT person. Yeah. If it requires a new phone, then it just requires a new phone. A lot of people are really savvy now, and the tracking and the stalking is at a new level. Particularly over the last 12 months, I found that stalking is really, really concerning. And stalking is something that people should really be concerned about, because it is an indicator when you look at homicides and domestic violence deaths. They're all stalked. And so, get that technical advice that you need. Change passwords, change them again, just in case you're not sure. Understand what family things are linked together, the family sharing and all of those sorts of things. Yeah. So there's a bit of a list that they really need to have when they are going through this, how to detangle themselves from the technical and technology of their family unit.
I think we need to put a list together for that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we need to do that. Safety plan. So I suppose the safety plan we discussed, it's your safety person, right? So it's got to be someone that you trust, that you know is not going to go to your partner or your ex-partner, go, hey, letting you know that she's looking at leaving you. It can be anybody, but it has to be somebody that you can trust. And as you said, if you've tried leaving a few times, you don't want that safety person to be, oh, here we go again, it's not going to happen. They need to understand that trying to leave a DV situation can be really difficult. And perhaps they have left multiple times, but then they're kind of sucked back in, or I will change, I'm a different person, or whatever it is. So it's not like they're trying to do it on purpose or whatever. It can be really difficult to leave, especially if they're so mentally brainwashed, I suppose, that person's changed or will change. So I suppose the safety plan is really just that safety person. Yeah. And as we discussed, if you think you're getting tracked, you maybe go to an IT company and, make sure that your car's not tagged, take yourself off your family sharing and your family devices and all of that. There's probably nothing really else we need to add to that. Do you think?
No, I think that if you're in imminent harm, though, all of those things go out the window, and you get the children and yourself out as quickly as possible. You call the police, and you do all the things that you can, because you know what, a birth certificate and a passport can be replaced, right? Yeah. Sentimental things probably not, but your safety is the most important thing. And so there's a real difference between if I'm planning to leave and if I have to leave. And if you have to leave, get to the police, do what you need to do in regards to ensuring that you're safe and following the police's advice. And then you should go to a lawyer immediately so that you can get advice in regards to what to do with children. Because if there's a significant family violent incident, victims often agree because to the damnedest agreements, which really are often not always safe for their children, but they're trying to calm a situation down that they actually have no control over. And so they get into situations where, let's just, for example, a shared care arrangement, where really it's a no time arrangement, which is what, the court would probably consider. It's really hard to walk those things back. It's really hard to walk that back. So that legal advice in the first instance is really important. And sometimes you just have to get into the family court immediately to ensure the safety and ensure that you do what is required to ensure the safety of the children.
Yeah, and you're probably going to know that, so we're both collaboratively trained, but you're probably going to guarantee that your matter's not probably going to go down the collaborative path. It's probably going to be difficult. So there's a lot of you got to prepare yourself mentally for that it's not going to be a rainbows and unicorns family law matter. It's highly likely going to be difficult and probably drawn out and draining and
the family court's not for the faint-hearted, right?
No.
But the thing is that there are just some matters that have to be determined. There are some matters that need the scaffolding of the court in that family unit, and that just simply is the way it is. Not all matters are no-time cases. That most definitely is not the case. And the court's going through a flow again where they're really questioning no contact, even though they're talking about family violence. But what's the threshold for there to be no contact? So the court's very conscious about what does that do to children that don't have contact with one, where you're severing a relationship with one parent. That also is not an easy task either. But when we're talking about that high level violence, sexual coercion, physical abuse, it's just got the whole gambit of everything that we talk about. sometimes they just simply are no time cases for the safety of the children, but also the safety of the mother.
Yeah, definitely. So I suppose the legal side of things, so we discussed going to a lawyer, going to the police. There's ADVOs that can be put in place. There could be emergency housing, anything else from a legal perspective other than going to the police, maybe putting an ADVO on. We were talking about support services. So we're based in like the Hunter Valley, Newcastle area. Are you anything above an ADVO? Are you aware of any like amazing housing options for people, like anywhere that you can think of? But obviously we're in the Hunter Valley region. That people might turn to.
There's some really good services. So, for example, in Singleton, you've got the Neighbourhood Centre, which is a really active community member. In the Upper Hunter, they have all the supports at the QE2 building, and they also have the Upper Hunter Homeless service. Down here in Maitland, you've got Carrie's Place, you've got the Humes Housing, Compass Housing. You've got a lot of services. Jenny's Place, you've got a lot of services. Nova, which are phenomenal advocates. Vocal, which are phenomenal advocates and provide counselling. I suppose that would be just the other tip that I would say to victim survivors is you need to go to counselling to be able to unpack, move forward, create safe boundaries for yourself and the children moving forward. There's no shame in getting counselling. It is absolutely something that you should be doing that is a high priority for yourself. And so all of those services offer those sorts of supports or can navigate you to where you should be. They also offer programs.
Say Shark Tank is a good one.
Yeah, absolutely. They offer some really great victim-focused programs that assist with self-esteem, identifying red flags, because one of the concerns is that if that's all you know and that's all you know about a relationship, you're highly likely to go back into a relationship that has some of the same key indicators. So that's a real fear. And the other tip I would say to people is please don't jump back into another relationship. Please take time. In family law, you often find that one party seems to re-partner. Like you hear people go, oh my God, he had a girlfriend within 6 weeks of leaving. But in relationships, normally one party leaves during the relationship. They do their grief, they do their separation of emotions during the relationship. And then the other party is completely devastated when I didn't see this coming. Like, how could this be happening? How many times do you hear that, Stace? Like, honestly, all the time.
Yeah.
But what I would say to people is, whilst you've done your grieving and you're 18 months ahead of everyone else, your children have just lost their family unit. So a reintroduction of a new or an introduction of a new partner and your life going on while the other parents here completely devastated by, a shock, which probably shouldn't have been a shock, but they are. Be mindful of your children. Be mindful of how they have lost their family unit, because it's not just about mum and dad. It's about the children. And now they have 2 homes. They have 2 beds. They have 2 of everything now, except all they really want, most kids, is for there to be one house and mum and dad together. So be mindful and respectful of your kids. That would be a big take home. That's not got anything to do with family violence. That's just really about family law.
Yeah, actually I did. So you've got my course that you're aware of, and actually did a module or a lesson yesterday on the separation spectrum. And it was exactly as you said, that, there is probably someone that has been checked out of a relationship for a while and they've processed, like in their mind, that might be still together, but they've gone. And then you've got that person that was blindsided by it and they didn't know that it was coming, and maybe they should have known, maybe they didn't know. and it's then how that family law matter is going to go. So you might be ready to charge ahead and go through the probate settlement and everything, but the person over here is probably still going like, WTF, what's just happened? And like, I'm still processing this. So that also has to be taken into account. And again, it's not necessarily DV related, but it's like, hey, you might have to wait for this person over here to catch up just because you're here and the other person might be here. You might just have to be a little bit patient.
Yeah. And it's just that, we're talking about relationships, in these circumstances where both parties have the ability to be emotionally regulated and have a bit of insight.
Oh, someone's happy.
Bit of action on High Street in Maitland.
Right. So I think we probably, there's a few other points here, but I think we pretty well covered all of it. The only other thing I had was the biggest challenges that people can face, which we pretty well already have discussed as well. And we've let people know some resources and some local support services, at least to the Hunter Valley. If there's any more you can think of, let us know. We can pop them in the notes. But I guess the biggest thing for me is just know that there's no shame in where you are. There really should be no shame in anything. Is there anything that you want to finish off today that you want to let people know?
I think family violence is really hard to reconcile for the victim survivor and for the children. And I think that it really does take a village to be able to support, and I'm going to say women, once they leave these relationships. And if you're supporting a victim survivor of family violence, it is not at your pace. You cannot have unrealistic expectations of, well, why don't we do this and why don't we do that? Because this person has been dealing with trauma, and there are lots and lots of side effects of trauma. A lot of people leave and there's significant brain fog. There's significant angst. There's an inability to make decisions because their decision-making powers have been taken away from them. They sometimes find it really hard to parent if their parenting role has been diminished during the course of their relationship. So it's not just she's left, awesome, let's get going. That's not realistic. You need to be an ear and listen. You don't have to solve their problem because they're solving their problem by taking the first step of leaving. So that's not our role as active bystanders in the community. Our role is to assist them through their journey. And so be patient, be forgiving if it's not going at your pace, and understand that there are so many layers that need to be unpacked, that need to be addressed. And there's a reconditioning for victims of having their autonomy and rebuilding their self-esteem, which is often really, really, really low.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Well, thank you very much. I definitely think that we could do way more. We're already at an hour, but I definitely think that we'll be doing more in the future. So thank you, Jop, for your time today. And I hope you guys found today's podcast really helpful. So I'll catch you next time.